the best boss creates psychologically safe environments for people to be able to express where they're at, what they need from the boss, how he can help or she can help.
Welcome to yet another episode of the Leadership Lab. I'm Henry Kirk.
I'm Jonathan Aronson.
And today we are going to talk about when you're managing, yelling, losing your cool, letting your emotions get the best of you. Um, you know, in my previous roles, I have, I admit that I have lost my cool way too many times because actually, I don't really know why. I would love Jonathan to kind of like dive into this a little bit more to help me understand where I went wrong. I don't yell anymore. Well, yeah, I don't yell anymore. No, definitely don't. Because I feel like I have a better grasp on my emotions, but I know that this is something that a lot of people struggle with because I talk to folks and they say, my boss is always yelling at me about this or that or something like that. So, um, yeah, I think that would be a great thing to dive into today. What do you think, Jonathan?
Yeah, we can talk about that. Just before we get into this, I would love for the listeners to get a follow up of what happened after our last podcast. We talked about some conflict you were experiencing with your team, and just wondering what the outcome was. And I'm sure our listeners are interested as well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So, a quick follow up. We had after we did our podcast. I took that advice and we went and had about a almost a 2 hour kind of like retrospective meeting where we all got together and talked about what was going well and what wasn't, and it ended up resolving a lot of the issues that we had, and I felt like being able to kind of objectively look at how we were, what the root of the conflict was. We got to it that it was a lot of time management and pressure and decisions being made without the other voices. So once we kind of dove in there, it worked itself out, and I think everyone came out of it very happy. So it was great. Yeah, and we're gonna do this.
Henry, what did you apply though from what we discussed last week that seemed to work really well?
Um, well, I think it was framing the conversation. So I started it off by saying, "Hey, we need to be honest with each other, and we have to be able to kind of, you know, uh, um, how did I frame it? Like we need to be able to have an open and honest discussion about how the business operates that's not personal, and we need to make sure that we are everyone's voices are heard and whatnot. So I set the stage for the conversation that we had, and everyone was in agreement. And then we also let everyone have their time to bring up things that were concerning them, I think it just worked out
Mm-hmm.
well. I think we were close going into it. Like had already worked together for a bunch of years, so this was more of like setting the kind of norms for the team, the current company that we have that maybe we didn't stop and think about because when we entered this, we figured everything was great and we were just rushing to try to like do business. So, you know, I guess if I'm looking at the process, we're probably more through um, we've kind of passed the norming phase and now we're kind of performing, and we have to then keep in check by having like retrospectives every so often to make sure that we're you know all happy with how things are going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You definitely want to revisit the norms and give, and there might still be some storming out there, but they may not be bringing it up. So going back to conversational capacity of sponsor, that you want to definitely go back and check in from time to time, see if anybody hasn't brought up something that's concerning them, take a temperature check. Don't take that for granted. Sometimes no news could be bad news.
Hmm.
So, given the space as a leader, you want to make sure and check in. And remember, my big thing is don't assume. Check for understanding, right?
Yeah,
So
that's a
good.
good
I'm
point.
glad. I'm glad that worked.
Yeah, it worked out really well. And kind of like segueing into, losing your cool as a manager in the past. So, the conflict arose because somebody got very frustrated because we weren't kind of discussing things and like, creating norms and how we operate on a team. When I was one of my first startups that I had where I kind of jumped into entrepreneurship, I had no leadership experience whatsoever, and I was building up this company, and I would frequently lose my cool because, uh, like the people that would work with me were not doing things kind of the way I expected them. I guess I was assuming a lot of things. Like we could probably dive in, but what I thought was really interesting is like, why do you think that I would always just spring to lose my cool as opposed to looking at it rationally, where I would say, oh, well, maybe this person just needs to learn how to do it or needs practice. Like, why do you think that I was always when someone come to me and say, hey, we lost the sale, or hey, I don't understand this, product, or I don't. And I would lose my cool. I'd be like, well, why don't you just go read about it or go figure it out? Uh, why do you think that I would always do that?
Well, I'm going to ask the quintessential coaching question here, Henry.
Sure.
Why do you think it happened?
So when I reflect back on my time on those, most of it was my inexperience and I didn't know what to do. So I think that the my losing the cool was more of I didn't know how to handle the situation and I couldn't understand why they were not motivated enough to just go and figure things out on their own, like self-motivated people. But they were because yeah, many times they were. Maybe I created an environment where I had to maybe I micromanaged them and I created an environment where they had to check in with me all the time and I was frustrated. I don't know. Like that's the thing though. I lost my cool all the time. Like over the most ridiculous things sometimes too. Uh
Yeah. So, did you realize what was going on with you at the time?
No, it took me
Mm,
years to realize. I
okay.
actually apologized to everyone. If I didn't, I'll please let me know. But I'm pretty sure I
So,
apologized to everyone for how I acted.
so you were losing your cool all the time. It was coming out where you were being aggressive towards other people, raising your voice. Is that
Yeah.
correct? And kind of attacking them. Um, and you didn't notice any of this. You didn't. It didn't click with you.
I don't think so, to be honest.
Mm,
And nobody fought back against me. They just kind of listened and either listened and walked the road. Very strange
okay.
because I don't know why anyone put up with it. Because like when I hear stories at Google and Amazon and people come to me and
Hmm.
say my boss yells and screams at me for whatever reason, I said, well, why don't you? Why do you take it from them? And I'm like, why do you? They're like, well, I don't know what to do. And I think that I would, when I would yell at my team,
Yeah.
they would probably be like deer in headlights, just want to get me to
Yeah.
stop and then do whatever it took to probably avoid it from happening again, which didn't
Hmm.
necessarily mean solve the problem. So I can't understand why I never realized that it was ineffective.
Mm. Well, let's talk about a couple things. One is you weren't being mindful about being present moment, how you were showing up as a leader.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Plus, you had another expectation that everybody would be like you, right? And we've talked about that before.
Hmm.
I'm not coming up with this. I'm taking your words, but I find it really interesting, and I think it'll be valuable for the listeners to understand why they might be shutting down if this happens, and then also what they could do about it. Because I'm going to go back to the premise: you only have control over you. You don't have any control over other people. So first and foremost, there's a power dynamic going on here. Your boss, who is in charge of the work that you get to do, who's in charge of judging you for promotions, for bonuses, or even just how well you're doing your job in your boss's point of view, is again goes back to the power dynamic and how they can affect you. So that's one thing that people actually are fearful about speaking back up to the
Hmm.
boss.
Hmm.
Okay. Because they have so much influence over people's career in the work that they do. The other thing that goes on is that people, when you're being attacked, what's the natural thing that people will do? If you're being if you're being attacked, what does the person generally respond by doing what? Becoming
It'd be like
what?
closed off, I guess, kind of
Become
like yeah.
becoming defensive.
Hmm.
Okay? And then they might attack back, depending on who they are and what they're like. But the
Hmm.
first thing that comes is that they become defensive. And most people, especially I found engineers or mathematicians or scientists who tend to be a little more introverted type of personalities, they'll shut down. They just shut down. They're so uncomfortable with being attacked, and we're all uncomfortable with being attacked. Nobody likes being attacked, but definitely for people who are not vocal and who are not comfortable, necessarily attacking back either, or defending their point of view, they'll just shut down. And what happens when that happens to
Well, I think
communication,
yeah, just ends,
to
right?
anything? Nothing.
Yeah.
And what do you think they're talking around the dinner table that night about their boss?
Yeah, he's a jerk.
What are they saying?
He's a
Yeah.
jerk, and then they're probably like, "Well, why do you keep working there?"
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that all that is going on. All right.
Hmm.
Um Now bosses who are attacking, from my experience, it's because of a couple things. Um, First and foremost, it's the person's thinking, you're making me look bad.
Hmm.
Because people generally react to what's in it for me. All right. And then the second thing could just be frustration, because they're not getting what they need. They're trying to teach the person, they're not getting it. Um, all this kind of thing. And sometimes, people raise their voice. Think of your personal relationships, right? You raise your voice because you think that's going to change the situation. And you don't
Yeah.
even realize you're doing it. Remember, people have a fight or flight type of reaction. They don't even realize they're doing it
Yeah.
subconscious.
People still say that to me today. You're raising your voice, and like, no, I'm not.
Yeah,
I don't
right,
even
right.
realize
You're
I'm doing
screaming it
it.
louder. Right.
Yeah.
And when they say that, you just went on the defensive when you say that.
Yeah.
And you raise
Yeah.
your voice, but you're not the typical introvert, type of personality that I've run across.
Hmm.
You'll start fighting back.
Hmm.
And okay, so the whole premise here, going back to conversational capacity, I'm sorry, but it's a great communication book, really touches upon it. It's like, how is your behavior aligning to the big picture, the outcome that you are looking for? Is it helping or hindering?
Hmm. Yeah. I
Okay,
say.
tell me a time when you yelled at somebody, you got the outcome you wanted. I'd love
Oh,
to hear
never.
this.
No, never. I don't think it ever worked. Yeah, I don't think it ever
Yeah.
really worked. I would bark orders. I would do things. It was so frustrating. And like and honestly, I wonder. I was in my 20s when I did it, and I look back and I'd say it was a lot of it was immaturity. I didn't know how to be a leader or a manager or anything. And I think it's very interesting when people I didn't have any mentor, any coach or anything at the time. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know how to best behave. I was just doing the best I could. What I think is most interesting is like, how does it continue on for so many years? So when I hear of like grown adults that are well in their career, still losing their cool like I used to, like, what do you, what is wrong there? Is it that,
Well,
you know,
one is nobody's holding them accountable, that this
okay.
isn't behavior that's acceptable. Companies now are more aware of this. And, in
Hmm.
a relationship, if somebody yells at somebody all the time, a lot of people use the word it's an abusive relationship, right? Right?
Yeah.
Usually happens more in a family or close relationship thing than the
Hmm.
workplace. But, familiarity can breed contempt. And you heard that before. And also, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result is crazy, right? But bosses do it. They're being held more accountable now. Think about Google, right? When you were at Google, if your boss kept yelling at you, or were there avenues if you could not resolve it that you could take at Google to try to rectify the
I
situation?
suppose so, but in my corporate career, there were examples where I heard of, let's call it abusive managers, where they
Uh
were
huh.
yellers,
Yeah.
and nothing was done, even if people went
Yeah.
to their
Okay.
managers. So my question to you would be is, okay, so you've identified let's say your manager is a yeller, and you've
Yeah.
identified it. What are some things that you can do if you said that most of them
Okay.
aren't hold accountable? What could you do to try to call it out?
So, and this takes a little courage. Don't get, I mean, for the
Hmm.
reasons I told you, but don't attack back your manager. Talk about you, not about them. All right. And one of the things is using I feel statements. Um, I feel uncomfortable when you're yelling at me like that. Um, or, I feel uncomfortable when how you're raising your voice and I'm feeling like I'm being attacked right now. And let them know I'd like to resolve this, but I'm not comfortable right now communicating.
Oh, interesting.
Talk
I see.
about yourself, not about what they're doing. Usually, what happens is once you say that, and try to be calm when you're doing it, okay? Um, usually
Hmm.
when that happens, the person's going to back down. They're going to go, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that," because you're calling them out on it. All right. And then you could say, well, I feel this does happen quite a bit, and it's really not motivating me and helping me
Hmm.
to deliver on what you need deliver on. And what
Hmm.
I would appreciate is that we could have a calm conversation, figure out how I can deliver on what's needed or meeting your expectation. And I may need your help on this. And honestly, me feeling attacked or isn't helping me to move forward to meeting your expectation or getting the outcome we want. So again, you're focusing on the big picture. You're not focusing on the person yelling at you because you focus on the person yelling at you, saying, you're yelling at me. It makes you feel uncomfortable. Okay. That person's going to get on the defensive. And now you have a total breakdown in communication. Um, if you need and it's more comfortable for people, you know, and the person's yelling, saying, I hear what you're saying. I'm not feeling comfortable with this right now. Can we take a break and come back to this? Okay.
I see.
So
Similar to
you
the
actually
conflict
remove
resolution.
you,
Yeah.
yeah, you remove yourself from the situation till emotions calm down, and then you have the conversation.
Very interesting. Okay. So it's very similar. So, okay. I think this is really helpful for if you are the receiving end of this. Now, I have tried to think about what if no, since nobody when I was younger said, Henry, you're making me uncomfortable, you're making me feel attacked. Is there anything that I can do as a manager to try to become self-aware to realize that I'm raising my voice or yelling at folks?
Yeah.
Like if there's a listener out there that says, "Oh, I don't yell," but it turns out they do and they don't realize it. What are some of the things that like they could do to try to see if maybe they're causing people to shut down because of that?
Well, there's a few things. One is a lot of times when you're upset, it shows up in your body before your head.
Okay.
So pay attention to what you're feeling or what your body is reacting to when you're upset. Because, we have this subconscious thing going on. And a lot of times for me, my arms tingle. For other people, the hairs
Same.
on their neck might go up, or they'll feel constricted, or their breathing will become labored. So notice what your body is doing. When I first heard that, I was like, huh? My body is doing, but it actually does show up first in your body.
Yeah.
Then from that, once you start to notice it, you can do something about it. Now you're starting to become mindful. And again, if you haven't done it, maybe I encourage most people to practice mindfulness, learn how to
Mhm.
be in the moment, present moment. Um, I think I mentioned before, I do a mindful, listen to a mindful program called Waking Up by Sam Harris,
Mhm.
10 minutes a day, and it builds that muscle. Um, and also understand what it is, how you want to be seen as a leader. Do you want to be seen as a yeller? Do you want to see as a bully? Because that's what you're really doing.
Mm.
Or do you want to be, which ideally, they found evidence has proven, being in service to those people that you lead, or being a servant leader, has much greater positive effect on meeting outcomes than being a dictator, being a tyrant, being bossy. So, what kind of leader do you want to be? Because the behavior has to change within you first.
Mm.
You have to shift your beliefs that this is in you, this is worth your while to lead a different way. And all this is evidence based. So I encourage all the listeners to go out there and Google it and go see what's on the internet, and you're going to find millions of stuff about what motivates people, what causes people to perform at a high level. And I guarantee you, it is not yelling and attacking.
Mm. Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, it's for me, I didn't realize that I did it until somebody like called it out. But they didn't call it out in the way that you suggest, where they said I'm feeling uncomfortable. They just said flat out like nobody likes working with me, because I'm a
Ah,
jerk. And that was when I was like, no, I think I'd mentioned this in a previous episode. Like I was just floored. I had no idea. I thought everyone liked working with me. So because I was very nice outside of the yelling, like it and being like aggressive.
the other thing that can work for leaders is doing a 360, which is an anonymous survey, or 180. And there are anonymous surveys that go out to the people that you lead, and they give you feedback. And it's anonymous because they don't know who it's coming from. And then that way you can get what people are perceiving out there,
Mm,
and people can feel a little more safer giving you feedback as the
yeah,
boss. But you really want to try, as the best boss, create psychologically safe environments for people to be able to express where they're at, what they need from the boss, how he can help or she can help. And really be mindful of that. Understand your behavior is everything as the boss.
yeah.
That's where it starts. It starts at the top, and you're the top of the team.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. Yeah, I
yeah,
think maybe in a future episode we can talk about receiving feedback, because that's
okay.
something that I think that once I kind of realized my pitfalls, I was constantly seeking. And I've
Yeah,
noticed that sometimes, despite my best efforts, I don't always get the feedback that I need to keep improving.
okay,
And a lot of it's because of different people. So maybe we could do that in the future. Just make a mental note so our viewers hold us accountable for that. This is great. So, yeah, we got to start wrapping up now, here, Jonathan.
okay.
So I'll say, so to sum up, if I've understand you correctly, when you're in a situation where somebody in authority is yelling at you, raising their voice, use the "I feel" statements, where you want to say, "I
Hmm.
feel that I'm being attacked. I feel this," to try to make them aware of that. You don't attack
Hmm.
them. And then if you are the giving end of this and you don't realize it, then did I say something that was very exciting? Uh,
No, my
um,
mic just fell over.
oh, oh, okay. If you're on the giving end of this, to try to be more aware of your body's physiological effect on like
Hmm.
yourself, right? That's the two big pieces of advice here.
Yeah, well, that's to notice it, and really try to create a psychologically safe environment, for people to be able to communicate, you know. Again, one of the things was, how are you showing up? Notice your behavior, and that's for the recipient as well. And how is that aligning to the big picture? Is the conversation, is your reaction moving you towards the outcome, or is it moving you away from the outcome?
Amazing. Okay, great. This is super
Okay.
helpful. Awesome. All right, you want to close it up for us today?
Yeah, sure. So you've been listening to the Leadership Lab podcast. If you made it this far, please like or subscribe. It really helps with our viewership. And also, we really like to hear your comments. And I am a professional coach, a master certified coach. If any of you are having personal challenges and you want to even write to me, or you want a podcast on that topic, please feel free to write in as well. Um, so thank you again for listening. And my name is Jonathan Aronson.
And I am Henry Kirk.
Have yourself a wonderful day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and we'll see you right back here an hour ago next week.